Hello, welcome to Week 13's Bud Light's Prediction Amongst Friends. I'm your host, Hans Heiser. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone in your family. Here we go. It's rivalry week, and we've gotten here all kinds of upsets throughout the way, but the prophecy before the season, most people felt like Georgia was going to be the team out of the East, and it would be either Auburn or Alabama out of the West, and that's exactly where we stand going into this final week. A lot at stake in the Iron Bowl. Georgia already has their way into it, but still good old-fashioned clean hate. Their in-state rivalry against the Jackets. So many schools in the Southeastern Conference this week. They'll be playing in-state rivalries. We'll break them all down for you here right now, and who better to do so than my co-host Alex Martin-Smith via satellite from Paisley Park Studios just outside of Minneapolis. And happy Thanksgiving to you, Alex. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you too, Hans. I'm glad the internet allows us to still do this, even though I am nowhere near you at the moment.
That's right. Well, you know, that's the thing. We can continue to fool people as far as where you are. We've been telling them Nashville. Nobody has to know you've been in Minneapolis this whole time. I don't even know where you've been. But the bottom line is we're getting the show done. It's been a blast doing it with you all season long. We'll do it again next week in preparation for the SEC Championship. But let's go ahead and take a look at what happened last week between our picks, between you and I. You'll see last week I had a perfect record. I go 9-0 last week. No surprises there. You lost a couple tough ones. But the games were interesting, so I can't remember which ones you lost. I don't have the graphic in front of me, but I think you went 7-2 last week.
I know I picked UAB over Florida was one of them. I think I had Ole Miss in there, and I forget what the third one was, but I've been very consistent. I think that's a positive. Yeah,
you have been consistent. So we'll keep it up. Do we have the graphic for our standings up until? Okay, so no graphics for that, and we'll just go ahead and get the ball rolling on this week then. So we got the Iron Bowl. We know about this one. 7 out of the last 8 winners of this game have gone on to play for a national championship. Some interesting statistics here. You'll see all-time Bama leads the series 45-35 to 1. Of course, last year took care of business with an 18-point win. You know, from the outside looking in, Alex, that game that Auburn played against Georgia, that was as good as a game as they can play on both sides of the ball, in my opinion. If they can replicate that, on Saturday, they can win that football game. But that's the big question for me going into this game. What's the biggest question for you, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. It's those factors where they're hitting on everything against Georgia. It was just such an impressive win, and I don't think they can exactly replicate what they did that day and bring that into this Bama game. But as long as they hit on 3 or 4 of those things, and you look at strong quarterback play with Jared Stidham and a strong running game that's able to move the ball with Kerryon Johnson, the defensive line was outstanding against Georgia, and then that offensive game plan was really, really strong too. So, if they can bring all those factors together, and at least, hit 75-80% of what they were able to do against Georgia, they've got a great chance.
Everybody's making these injuries out for Alabama to be a huge deal, and they've had to adjust on the fly. The number of linebackers they've lost this year, I believe, are 4. Some of them, possibly a couple of them, could be in play on Saturday. Decisions haven't been made there yet, but it's a testament to the coaching staff, their ability to get these young guys up to speed. My thing is, when I look at this, Mississippi State was a good game for Alabama because they're similar in their style offensively of what they want to do as far as run first and then maybe throw the ball down the field after they establish that run. The magic number here is 200 yards. Alabama hasn't allowed a 200-yard game all season long, and Auburn, when they don't rush for 200 yards, they don't win the game. So is this a team that you see Auburn, if they can replicate that performance they did against Georgia, can they run for over 200 yards with or without Alabama being at full strength defensively?
It worries me a little bit that, Auburn's been missing Cameron Petway, and where they haven't necessarily needed him against some of these inferior teams. It'd be really nice to have that dual threat at running back, or with Kerryon and Cameron. So when it's just Kerryon, you get a little nervous because sometimes these star running backs, they don't have the big games that people project for them and against Alabama. But I do think the Mississippi State game for Alabama is a little bit of a red flag. because you look at their running back, Eris Williams, almost hit the 100-yard mark. I think Fitzgerald had 60 plus, and he had trouble with them the year before. So I think there was a little bit of a red flag there with Mississippi State, and I think Auburn should be able to run the ball at least a little easier than they have been against Alabama the past few years.
Yeah, one of these quarterbacks in this game that'll be starting for their respective teams has played in an SEC championship, won an SEC championship, played in a national championship game. He's been battle tested. He's still a young man, but he's been in a lot more big games than has Jarrett Stidham. How do you see the quarterback play breaking down in this one?
I like Jalen. I think he's been a little more dependable through the air this year, but Alabama hasn't really used him in terms of volume in the same way that it did a year before, where they were leaning on him a lot more in 2016 through those first 8 to 10 games, and this year they just haven't needed to as much. So he hasn't really hit that wall. He's playing pretty well here at the end of the year. And I like what he's doing, but I do really enjoy watching Jarrett Stidham, and he has a lot of these factors that I think line up well against an Alabama team. You look at the efficiency, where he's completing almost 70% of his passes. He's only thrown 4 picks. And then he can also make big plays down the field, where he's over 9 yards per passing attempt too. So he kind of has that total package of a quarterback who can go in, is able to make those big plays, avoid the mistakes, and hit his receivers for the short gains you need to kind of get past that bend don't break Alabama approach and avoid the turnovers that can really be backbreaking. So I think Stidham does have a great opportunity here to outplay Hurts against Bama, but I think also that you're looking at Hurts as a potential SEC Player of the Year again if he has a big game, and you can't underestimate his legs and his ability to get outside of the pocket to sort of neutralize that ferocious Auburn pass rush by keeping them guessing as to where he's going to go next with the ball. So that's going to be definitely a big important duel, and might end up deciding the game. And I think I'll probably side with Jalen Hurts here if I had to pick one or the other.
Right, you almost have to at that point. And you look at the help that they get from the running game. Jalen Hurts, by himself is a weapon rushing the football, but you throw in Williams, you throw in Scarborough, some of the other guys that they get the ball out there in the run game, and then you look at Auburn and it's the Kerryon Johnson show. And every week you're thinking, well, maybe they're going to start limiting his carries. It ain't happening, brother. I mean, they're going to give this guy the ball 25, 30 times, but it seems to me like he's that kind of back where the more you give him the ball, the more plays he's going to make for you and the more comfortable he's going to be. He's a special talent.
He certainly is. And, I was on a radio call yesterday, and they asked me, who's the SEC Offensive Player of the Year? Who's that going to be? And I was like, I don't think it's going to be one of the quarterbacks. And I was kind of racking my brain because I hadn't really thought about it. But Kerryon is a great, he's just a great guy for that award so far this season. He just keeps finding the end zone. If he has a big game in the Iron Bowl, I want to say he's almost a shoe-in for that OPOY award because he's just been really great for them this year, especially because I mentioned earlier, Cameron Petway has missed most of the season here, and he's out for the rest of the way. So they really need Kerryon to keep getting that high volume of carries, taking the ball into the end zone like he has been, and really complementing that pass game for Auburn as their pass game sort of blossoms here at the end of the year.
Alex, before we make our predictions, I want to talk about the coaching side of things. We know about Nick Saban, and Gus Malzahn seems to be a little bit disrespected year after year. And granted, we talked about it all season long, Alex, his shortcomings in the big games, blowing that big lead against Florida State in the championship game. Same thing this year at LSU. He'll blow a lead for you, but the game in the Georgia game from start to finish was as good a game as I've ever seen him coach. Is that something we can expect, or is it almost like the Auburn fan base is kind of waiting for a coaching letdown in this game?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the answer. It was that team that beat Georgia? Are they the real Auburn team? I'm inclined to say no because, we talked about this stat before, but they're 0-7 in those top 5 games before they beat Georgia. The X factor, I think, is really strong, confident quarterback play because it just allows you to really open up that game plan as they did against Georgia, and they executed it so well. So while I think that yes, they are a better team now than they have been in the last couple of years. Can they beat Alabama? That's going to be sort of the litmus test here. And if they can't win, or if they get embarrassed on Saturday, again, we're having these conversations about Gus's future at Auburn. Is he going to run off to Arkansas, or what's going to happen? So I think it is definitely a very pivotal game for his legacy.
All right, Alex, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'll let you go first on this one. We've gone back and forth on it. I know I have. Originally, I was with Auburn. I'm kind of leaning the other way. I end up going with Alabama. I'll explain why. But your thoughts on this game? Who you taking and why?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that Auburn can win this game, and that's a huge compliment. I think they have a great team. They can walk in there and win. And, I just look at Alabama, and this is still a team that is almost impossible for me to bet against, to pick against. Just with the history that this program has, especially recent history. I know this year, not the strongest of schedules. And Auburn has pretty much matched them on common opponents and that win differential. But I think it's going to be Alabama on Saturday, and I think the key factor, the difference between Alabama and Georgia, we talked about those two games, is that Hurts is going to have a little more mobility, and he's going to be able to stymie that pass rush a little better than a Jake Fromm could, and that Georgia offensive line could. And I think that's going to be that X factor for Alabama on Saturday. Going to be a close one, but I've got the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, as far as having to make a prediction before the game, I got to pick one or the other. I liked Auburn. I'm going to go with Alabama. But would I be surprised, to your point, if Auburn won the game? Absolutely not. And then you throw in the fact that this series, we've seen just about everything happen, right? I mean, it's absolutely crazy. The return field goal for the touchdown, the kick six. You also have the 24-point lead, the Cam Newton year. I mean, anything goes in this series. And I'll say this for Auburn. That environment that Georgia walked into a couple Saturdays ago, it's going to be every bit as hype as that on Saturday. So if Alabama has a slow start in this one, it potentially could snowball on them a little bit. But I have a hard time believing that Auburn's going to be able to come with 60 minutes of football like they did against Georgia. And that's what it's going to take to beat a team like Alabama. I like the experience at quarterback for Alabama. I give the coaching advantage, special teams advantage as well. So I'm going to lead with Alabama. And that's our Bud Light prediction for the Iron Bowl this year. And speaking of Bud Light, I do want to remind you guys, we'll talk a little bit about a special tailgate we got going on, but all season long, be sure to huddle up with your friends, some ice cold Bud Light. It's the beer that's popular amongst friends and even more on game day. And you'll see right there, Rivalry Weekend tailgate going down in Columbia. That's this Saturday between Clemson, South Carolina. And the Bud Light tailgate will be at that game, located at the corner of Bluff Road. That's on Hemlock Road. Tailgate starts at 3:30 and runs all the way up to kickoff. Stop by a complimentary Bud Light. Of course, you got to be 21 years or older to participate. All right, Bud Light predictions. Next game, good old-fashioned clean hate. Georgia Tech. Lost season for the Jackets. As for the Bulldogs, they're already in the SEC championship game, but look, they don't want to end the season like this. They have higher goals. They're one of 7 teams that most people think have a legitimate chance at 4 spots in the college football playoff. Tech's won 2 out of the last 3. Georgia's a senior-laden team. You can't lose this game if you're Georgia, Alex.
Yeah, you really can't afford to. This plan is simple for Georgia. You win this one, you win the SEC title game, and then you're in the playoff field, and you're playing for a national title. And saying that, this is not going to be some kind of cream puff matchup that some people on the outside looking in might think. Look at Tech winning 2 out of the last 3 against Georgia, including last year coming back from with a 14-point fourth quarter to win that game. The thing with Tech this year, they've been a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde, where last week they gave up 300-plus yards on the ground alone to Duke, and they can't obviously afford that against Georgia. But they also have played some pretty tough games this year where they, quality wins, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. Right. They showed some pretty good fight against Clemson just before Halloween. So I do like the fight that Tech is possibly going to bring to this game, but they don't have the weapons across the board to stick with Georgia, especially if they can't stop the run on Saturday.
Right, and that's the big thing. You know, offensively, Coach Johnson, he's been doing it for 200 years. It seems like he'll be able to throw a couple wrinkles in there, and they'll be able to move the sticks and get some yards. But I think defensively, they just can't get it done. Paul Johnson, you know, this is hard to believe, but this is his, I believe, his 9th game against the Jackets, or maybe his 10th. He's 3-6. You know, most people would look at that situation and say he hasn't done well, but for most of these games, he's competed in them. And the fact that they won it last year, Alex, Kirby Smart has been ending every single practice session with some form of preparation for this game because of their non-traditional offense. I think that's a testament to Coach Johnson and the high level that he runs it at.
Yeah, certainly. You know, a really strong program and a lot of history there, and they've just played well against Georgia, you know, under Paul Johnson, and it's reason enough to think that this is going to be a little bit of a battle, at least for a little while. And I'm not convinced that the old Georgia has gotten its full strength back yet after that Auburn loss. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if they can really fire on all cylinders, even though they've got that spot locked up in Atlanta. It's just such a weird position to be in where you're playing multiple weeks in a row knowing that you've got a ticket to the conference championship game.
Well, you know, this has happened a few years actually, including last year, where Tech's really thrown a monkey wrench into Georgia's ultimate season-long goals, and then the next year they've responded, and they've responded well. The revenge factor. So I expect them to be playing a little bit angry coming out on Saturday. But, you know, the biggest thing about this game is if you can find a way to win it, Alex, it's what lies ahead. And you can't help it being a football fan, as an SEC fan or whoever you are, the interest of, okay, we all realize if Georgia gets in the SEC championship and they beat Georgia Tech, if they beat whomever it is on the other side from the West, they're going to be players in the playoff. With that aside, Alex, who do you think Georgia has the best chance of beating in an SEC championship, Auburn or Alabama?
Well, you know, I think Alabama's probably going to be the team that's there, but Georgia would love to see Auburn again. I think more so than Alabama. You know, maybe this is maybe contrary to what the players think in their heads, but you just want to play Auburn again and force them to go 2-0 against you. If you can avoid Bama and still make it to the playoff, I mean, that's a pretty good situation to be in. So definitely take your chances against Auburn over Alabama in that game.
Yeah, and then in that situation, you'd have a #1 all season long Alabama team on the outside looking in with a lot of 2-loss teams and conference champions looking over their shoulders saying, are they going to leave Alabama out too? All right, so let's make our predictions. Bud Light predictions, Georgia Tech. I'll go first in this one. I think the Dogs roll. I think the commitment that Kirby Smart showed as far as working on some plays every day at practice just for this game because he didn't want to have a letdown. You throw in the fact that this is a senior-laden defensive team. Offensively, I think they're going to be able to move the ball at will against Georgia Tech. I like Georgia in this one by a few scores.
Yeah, you know, as you mentioned before, this is a tough offense to play against Georgia Tech. I think Georgia's going to do a pretty decent job of slowing them down in that first half and getting ahead with that running game because Tech can't really stop anybody on the ground right now. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy with going with Georgia right now. I'm pretty comfortable with that.
All right, and that's our Bud Light prediction here on Bud Light Prediction Amongst Friends. Guys, hit us up on Facebook Live. Guys throwing in scores here for the Auburn, Alabama, for the Iron Bowl, saying 23-20 final Auburn. I find that interesting because Auburn hasn't won a game all season long where they have not scored more than 24 points. So that would be something that we haven't seen yet. This is Bud Light Predictions Amongst Friends. There's only one thing fans can agree on all season long. That's tailgating with ice-cold Bud Light. All right, moving on. Prediction Amongst Friends. Next game, A&M LSU. Alex, news comes out today. Kevin Sumlin not going to be back as head coach regardless of the outcome of this game. Are you surprised?
No, not surprised at all. You know, this is something we've been talking about all year that I didn't see this marriage ending well in 2017. I didn't see him coming back next year, and it does not surprise me one bit. And I hope A&M can still bring some fight.
Yeah, I got to tell you, the win against Ole Miss, it was on the road. I thought their defense played maybe one of their better games of the year. And I thought Starkel got a little bit more comfortable as the game went on. I mean, he scored those couple touchdowns early on, but those were easy plays. He was under distress there a little bit, but is Starkel the guy moving forward if Kevin Sumlin's not around that they can build the program around?
I think it's just too early. You don't know who's coming in, and I think that's going to totally change the vision of the program, obviously. And they're definitely going to look at his film and say, okay, you did some good things here at the end of the year. And, these are the opportunities right now, this LSU game, the bowl game that's forthcoming for A&M. If Starkel can go out and play really well in those, then, yeah, he's probably going to be a shoo-in to at least start the conversation next year at quarterback, just because you can't deny a guy who finishes the year really, really strongly and show some good stuff. So I think unless he has those great games, though, it's probably going to be tough for him to say, yeah, I'm officially the guy when we still don't know who's going to be there next year in that coaching spot.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's hard to believe with LSU, they don't lose this Troy game. They're probably a top 10 team. They're sitting there at 9 wins. They find a way to win this. They're looking at 10 and then a bowl win for 11. What could have been? But, they righted the ship. I think Coach O and his staff has done an outstanding job. Darius Geis has gotten healthy, and I don't see him slipping up in this. So I'll go ahead and make my Bud Light prediction here. I'm going LSU. I'm curious to see what kind of effort you're going to get out of the Aggie kids, knowing that their coach is a dead man walking. I think that's going to play a hand in this game, and I just think LSU's got more talent than Texas A&M.
Yeah, a lot of intangibles working against A&M. I think they're 0-6 against LSU since joining the conference, and this time of year under someone that they just don't tend to play well. Geis has killed them the last couple of years, so I think he's going to have another big game against the Aggies, and LSU's going to get the win.
All right, there we are, both on board with the LSU Tigers in that one. All right, moving along, Bud Light prediction amongst friends. Florida State, I can't believe this. I remember, I think it was 1999, I made a road trip down there for Florida State. It was one of the craziest sporting events I've ever been to in my life. Now here we stand. Florida State 2017. Not what most people expected going into the year. Look at this thing right here. 1959 was the last time, Alex, these two schools played each other when they both had a losing record. What an awful year it's been for these two programs.
Yeah, so disappointing. You look at the preseason, and people were talking about Florida State. I mean, the majority of analysts and experts had Florida State in that top 4, taking one of those playoff spots, and Bama kind of ruined those dreams and knocked DeAndre Francois out for the season. But you also had Florida in the top 25. Are they going to make it back to the SEC title game and maybe finally win? So, it's not just that they're both bad. It's just that they were supposed to be so good, and this was going to be one of the marquee non-con games of the year. So certainly very disappointing that we're in this spot now.
Yeah, and the storyline, you talk about the SEC East Championship and all that kind of stuff. Well, they're going to have to get the right guy in there to do that. And so all the stories right now are following one Chip Kelly. And, the writing was on the wall. When McElwain went down, Kelly was the big name out there. You knew they were going to spend some money. You figured that his name would be brought up. Well, it turns out they've been having conversation. Of course, Jim Moore gets fired at UCLA. And so now it's apparently in Chip Kelly's court whether he wants to go to UCLA or Florida. What are you hearing about that? And if you're Chip Kelly with your ties to the West Coast and this opening at Florida, what's your decision?
Well, people have to remember that UCLA, that's still a pretty good destination for being able to recruit good classes. The Pac is just a little less competitive than the SEC is, especially at the top if you're trying to win championships. And that's where Chip Kelly really made his name in Oregon. He knows that area well and that conference well. And I just selfishly would love for him to end up at Florida because I think that would be such a fun fit. You bring that offensive mentality back there and really just kind of rile some people up and mess up those standings and maybe put Florida back at the top within a short couple of years. But that would certainly make the Florida-Georgia rivalry kick up a notch, I think.
Maybe when the Gators came out with those ridiculous scaly uniforms like they were in the swamp and everything, maybe they were just throwing some bait out there to see if Chip Kelly would bite. I mean, that's right up his alley.
Yeah, that's right. They're not quite as ugly, I think, as a couple of things Oregon has tried over the years, but they really got close. Those things were pretty horrendous, and that's a good point. Maybe that's when maybe when Chip looked at the TV and said, Florida, maybe that's where I'll go next year.
Well, don't forget, Kevin Sumlin leaves, Texas A&M opens up. Of course, their athletic director has ties with one Jimbo Fisher. Crazier things have happened, so people talk about him possibly going there. So maybe neither of these coaches are there next year. All right, so here we go. Time to make our prediction in this one. Alex, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I've got Florida State over Florida. I think, both of them have been really rough, and there's enough reason for hope over the last couple of weeks where, maybe they could pull it together and win a game. But for right now, FSU's got a little bit more stable program. They've got some, more stable quarterback play than Florida does, and I think they're going to pull it off.
Yeah, I agree with you. Florida State this season got away from them when Francois went down. They're playing a lot of young people. I think it's going to set them up well for next season. It's also why I think Jimbo will be back. And I think Florida State wins this game. It's a lost year for Florida. Franks isn't the guy. When Del Rio got hurt, that was really the end of everything for them. And throw the suspensions. It's been a disaster for Florida. I think it all ends. They're going to be put out of their misery on Saturday. And Florida State wins that. And I think they rescheduled. They got Northern Colorado coming in. So, hey, they take care of them. They can be bowl eligible. Just what Jimbo Fisher had in mind when the season started.
Yeah.
All right, exactly. That's our Bud Light prediction on Florida State. We are brought to you by Bud Light. Want to remind you, we got a little tailgate going down. You see it right there, Clemson and South Carolina. They're going to be at the game this weekend. They're going to be located at the corner of Bluff Road and Hemlock Road. Tailgate's going to start at 3:30 and runs all the way up to kickoff. Stop by for complimentary Bud Light. Can't beat that. Of course, you got to be 21 to participate. All right, rivalry week continues. Tennessee and Vanderbilt, we talked about it. There was potential for these two schools to play each other on the final day of the year, both being 0-7 in conference play, with the dreaded goose egg on the line. And I'll be darned, Alex, here we stand, and Tennessee and Vanderbilt have 0 combined SEC wins. What a disaster it's been.
Yeah, we talked about, Florida State, how did we get here? But really with Vandy and Tennessee, Vandy knocked off number 18 Kansas State. They were sitting at 3-0. Tennessee was a Hail Mary away from starting 3-0. Like you said, lost every single game in the SEC to this point. I think combined 3-13 since that point that I mentioned after the Felipe Franks Hail Mary. So certainly very disappointing seasons on both sides. And one coach is out. You look at Derek Mason, and maybe he'll be questioning his job status here over the next couple of weeks. But it's certainly a surprise to me that both of these teams have fallen so far. It's a little sad, honestly.
Yeah, it is sad. Let's talk a little bit about Coach Mason. Flying high, big win at home against Kansas State early in the year, and then defensively things have really gotten away from him. Obviously, that's what they need to address. I think the expectations I know the expectations, Alex, were higher than what they've accomplished this year. If they lose to Tennessee and they finish 0-8 in conference, let's say by a couple touchdowns, do you have to reevaluate your coaching situation?
I think you have to at least reevaluate it, as you say. I don't know if they have to make a big rash decision on this one, but certainly look at the job he's done, and it's all about moving forward from here. Does he have the respect of his players? Are they going to want to play for him next year? Or do recruits want to play here? And for Vandy, everything kind of stems, at least from my perspective, from the Alabama game when Vandy came in 3-0. They lost by 59 or whatever it was, and they had players who, on the Alabama side, who said that Vandy players were quitting in the middle of the game, said they didn't want to be there anymore. And ever since then, they have just been really, really bad defensively. And I have to think that there's a little bit to that Bama effect. When you go into a game, a big game that's on a 2:30 slot, 3:30 slot on CBS, and you look like a high school team, I just think that's terrible for morale, and I think that really showed for Vandy, and it just snowballed. And now we're here where this is a really bad football team that might be the worst one in the conference. And I don't think they started out that way in September. I do think this is a different team.
Well, real quick before we make our predictions, I think you're 100% right. We've talked about it that they just didn't belong on that stage. But to me, that's an indictment on Coach Mason. He's got to be able to talk to these kids and get them through this and get them prepared to win. I'm not saying he's not. They've lost some tough games, but if that's the reason, you got to do better than that. So, hey, look, Tennessee, they've never gone a season without winning an SEC game. They win one. I can't see it. I can't. see him go 0-8. So give me Tennessee in this one, just for that sake, just for that argument alone.
Yeah, I think there's a little more trending upward going on with the Tennessee program right now. Garantano looked okay last week, and Vandy got, an okay final against Mizzou, but they were down 35-0. They're
Right.
awful on defense right now, and I think Tennessee does enough to keep that older brother role here.
Well, Tennessee's got a little payback because they got beat in this game last year. So there we go. Alex and I both on Tennessee get their first SEC win this year. All right, our Bud Light Prediction Amongst Friends show moves on, and we're going to chop it down, Alex. We're going to go rapid fire. We're going to get right through these pretty quickly. Clemson, South Carolina. They put it on them last year. I mean, Clemson beat them 52-7. South Carolina obviously going to keep it closer than that this year. Games in their own backyard. How do you see this one shaking out? Who you got?
Yeah, South Carolina's got a little bit better defense than they had. Clemson's offense is not quite as great. So I think more of a low-scoring game, but I'm sticking with Clemson in this one.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think it's going to be close, but I'm going Clemson as well, which would set up for one heck of an ACC championship in Charlotte the following week. If Miami can take care of Pittsburgh, a matchup of those two teams with who knows what, maybe 2 spots on the line. But it sets up well. Coach Muschamp, by the way, in conversation for SEC Coach of the Year. He's done an outstanding job. All right, Louisville, Kentucky. Coach Petrino, they had bigger goals in this year. They're at 6-4. I think everything starts and ends with their quarterback play. He's had a better year statistically than he did last year when he won the Heisman.
Yeah, the difference for them is just the wins and Lamar Jackson not playing as strong in the second halves of games or fourth quarters where they really need him to play his best. But he's got 40 total touchdowns. He's got more than 4,500 yards right now, passing and rushing. And I think he's gonna take this to the next level against Kentucky this week, and he's going to, I think hit those averages of 250, 150, 3, 4 touchdowns. This just seems like a perfect game for him to really let loose statistically.
Yeah, that Kentucky defense I saw in Athens last week, they were a little thin. Second half, they didn't have much left in the tank, so I expect him to run wild in what's more than likely his final home game. Give me the Cardinals in this one as well. All right, our fourth game here before we wrap things up in our final block. We got Mississippi and Mississippi State, of course, better known to most folks as the Egg Bowl. Anything can happen in this game. The game's in Stark Vegas. Mississippi State's had a special year, an opportunity to win their 9th game. They're a heavy favorite in this one. What do you like, Alex?
I do like Mississippi State, but you can't underestimate. This is Matt Luke's final game, potentially, probably here for Ole Miss, and these players, I think, respect him to the level where they want to go out and win one for him and put him on their shoulders. And their passing offense is good enough right now to make me think they have a shot. But I'm sticking with MSU. I think their ground game is going to get it done for them.
Yeah, I agree. Ole Miss, they had a chance last week to get a big win against A&M, couldn't get it done. I think maybe that was the one that could have possibly put him in this one with a little bit of momentum. But, hey, Luke's done a good job. Not this one. Mississippi State's got a special year going. Give me the Bulldogs here in the Egg Bowl. And then last but not least, Missouri and Arkansas. What can you say about your Tigers, man? These guys are on a roll. They're looking for 6 in a row.
They're
you
still
see right
firing.
there, he needs 3 touchdown passes to pass Andre Woodson from Kentucky for the SEC single-season record. He might get that in the first half, Alex.
Yeah, the way it's going, you might turn on that TV, go to eat some leftover turkey on Friday, and he's already got the record. They've been putting up crazy yards, crazy touchdowns in the first halves of these games. Like I said, 35-0 against Vandy last Saturday, and Arkansas is not really in prime position to shut down this Missouri offense. They're not the team to do it. So I think another big day for Locke. I think he gets the record, and I don't think it's going to be close. You look at that 28-4 TD to interception ratio over the last 7 games, Hans. It's crazy.
Yeah, he's been outstanding. The Arkansas defense, not so much. I mean, they kept him in it last week, but just an absolute awful call by Brett Bielema going for it, their own 44-yard line with 3 minutes left against Mississippi State. You're just telling your kids, hey, whatever, I'm a dead man walking, I don't care, whatever. I thought that was pretty bad. But anyway, that's his last game. So give me Missouri in this one. They're bowl eligible. They finished on a high note. I got to think the recruiting trail is going to be hot and sets up for what could be a pretty competitive year in the East next year. Who knows? So congratulations, Coach Odom, who saved his job, by the way. Alex, happy Thanksgiving, brother. Good to see you. Don't touch any of the paintings or anything in the Purple One's mansion, okay?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I respect greatness, and hopefully I was able to do this place justice. So thanks so much, Hans. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we'll do it again next week before the SEC Championship. But Alex, it's been a lot of fun, man. Thanks for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
All right, thanks, Hans.
You got it, man. We'll see you around. This has been Bud Light's Prediction Amongst Friends. Do want to remind you one more time, if you're going to be in the area, what are you doing? 4 hours before kickoff, it's on the corner of Bluff Road and Hemlock Road. Swing on by. They're going to have some complimentary Bud Light and a heck of a football game to follow. Come on by, but just remember you got to be 21 years old to participate. All right, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. Appreciate you guys commenting on our Facebook Live page. Thanks again to Alex Martin Smith. Thank you to everybody behind the glass involved. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and we will see you next week as we prepare you for the SEC Championship. See you guys.